Alright, so we talk a lot on this channel about how absolutely pathetic the Joe Biden administration is, refusing to confront the members of his own party who are eviscerating his entire legislative agenda, and basically treating the presidency not as some sort of an FDR-style power center, but more so as just like an advocacy position where he cheers from the sidelines and just hopes that good things happen. Now, we've been coming at this from a leftist critique of Joe Biden, but it seems like now even normie Democrats, even some of the biggest cheerleaders for the Democratic Party are starting to turn against Biden and recognizing how absolutely ineffectual he actually is. So, here from CNN, they say, after string of Supreme Court setbacks, Democrats wonder whether Biden White House is capable of urgency moment demands. So, a little bit of details here, and this is absolutely fucking hilarious. They say, Debra Messing was fed up. The former Will and Grace star was among the dozens of celebrity Democratic supporters and activists who joined a call with the White House aides last Monday to discuss the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. The mood was fatalistic, according to 3 people on the call, which was also co-organized by the advocacy group Build Back Better Together. How is that going for you guys? But they say Messing said she'd gotten Joe Biden elected and wanted to know why she was being asked to do anything at all, yelling that there didn't even seem to be a point in voting. Others wondered why the call was happening. So just to give you guys a perspective in terms of what it means to lose somebody like Debra Messing, coming out and saying that it doesn't even seem like there is a point to voting, okay? This person has been one of the single, most prominent Democratic cheerleaders over the last number of years, okay? This is somebody who spends significant portions of her life railing against the left and any critique of establishment Democrats that has been coming from the left for years now, okay? She has outright rejected any notion that Hillary Clinton or Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden are pathetic and that they aren't going to be effective as leaders within this country, within the Democratic Party. She is relentless in her critiques of the left and relentless in her knee-jerk reactionary defense of the Democratic Party establishment. So losing her, okay, losing even Debra Messing is really like the biggest red flag that you could possibly ask for in terms of a Democratic-controlled administration, okay? This is, absolutely fucking hilarious that they've lost Debra Messing, okay? Honestly, just amazing here. But it's not just Debra Messing. We also had recent polling data that came out here from the New York Post. They say 71% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run for 2024 re-election. 71%, okay? His approval rating right now at this point in his presidency is like literally the lowest of any president in my lifetime, or maybe even the lowest since Jimmy Carter's administration or something like that. So, historic levels of disapproval. I've talked about on this channel how disproportionately the trail off that he has been getting in his approval rating has been coming from young voters, namely young voters who are way to the left of Joe Biden on economic, foreign policy issues especially, but it's very obvious why he has been losing support, okay? He has not been doing anything. He has not been passing the big, somewhat half-assed structural reforms that he promised on the campaign trail. He hasn't followed through on student debt. He hasn't followed through on lowering prescription drug prices. He hasn't followed through on the $15 minimum wage. So many different things that you could point to as major flagship proposals that he was running on in 2020 that he promised young voters who held their nose and showed up and voted for him, and yet he turns around and he refuses to confront the members of his own party who are preventing those policies from being enacted into law. So it shouldn't be surprising to anybody that this is the trail of events that ended up happening. And again, just as a reminder, this is the same guy who in 2020 was telling his rich Wall Street donors that nothing would fundamentally change if he's elected. So, surprise, surprise, the guy who is railing against the entire Bernie Sanders agenda, the guy who is coming out and telling Wall Street donors that nothing is going to fundamentally change. Wow, I'm so shocked that this guy is not prepared to adapt to an ever-changing, dramatic political moment here that requires actual structural change that he doesn't even support. I mean, the idea that anybody would have thought that he would have been the, FDR figure that we needed in a moment like this is just embarrassing and laughable. But we continue here with more details because it just gets even worse from here. They say that afternoon, participants received a follow-up email with a list of basic talking points and suggestions of Biden speech clips to share on TikTok. So pumping out that propaganda there. But they continue saying the call 3 days after the decision eliminating federal abortion rights encapsulates the overwhelming sense of frustration among Democrats with Biden, it offers a new window into what many in the president's party describe as a mismanagement permeating the White House. Again, mismanagement. Keep in mind, this is the Joe Biden administration that half of what he was running on against Donald Trump was basically, we're going to be the adults in the room. We are going to be an effective managerial class, basically, and return us to normalcy. And even on that front, he's been completely incompetent. But they continue saying top Democrats complain that the president isn't acting with, or perhaps isn't even capable of, the urgency the moment demands. And they say rudderless, aimless, and hopeless is how one member of Congress described the White House. And 24 leading Democratic politicians and operatives, as well as several within the West Wing, tell CNN they feel this goes deeper than questions of ideology and posture. Instead, they say it gets to questions of basic management. I do disagree. I do think that this has much more to do with ideology than they're giving credit for in this situation. So just to give you guys a reminder in terms of what Joe Biden actually did throughout his Senate career, which was extensive and long. So, this ties into one of the main points that we were hearing relentlessly over the 2020 elections, where people were saying, Bernie Sanders, he wouldn't be able to be an effective legislator. We need somebody like Joe Biden who would be able to reach across the aisle and actually pass, big pieces of legislation through Congress. So that was the narrative that they sold us. But the follow-up question to that, which I don't think anybody in the mainstream media or the Democratic establishment class was asking, is what did Joe Biden actually accomplish legislatively by reaching across the aisle throughout his Senate career? So just some of the highlights here from Vox. We start off with the controversial 1994 crime law that Joe Biden helped to write. So Biden is in large part, or at least partially, responsible for the crisis of mass incarceration that we have right now. He literally allowed police groups to write this legislation that he then aggressively pushed for in 1994, helped write the 94 crime bill. Also, hear from The Guardian, how Biden helped create the student debt problem that he now promises to fix. So already on this front, still haven't gotten that, student debt cancellation, the $10,000 that he promised on the campaign trail. Never mind the $50,000 that's being proposed by Chuck Schumer. Never mind wiping the debt slate clean as is proposed by Bernie Sanders. He's done basically nothing on this front outside of rewarding people who got scammed by for-profit private colleges, but really is not even addressing this problem. And this is one of the biggest pieces of legislation, or most influential pieces of legislation, that he was responsible for crafting as a member of the Senate. The bankruptcy bills that were put in place that made it damn near impossible for people with student debt to dislodge their debt through bankruptcy procedures. But we got another one here. Biden's NAFTA vote is a liability in the Rust Belt. His record on trade could make him a target for both the left and the right. Biden, one of the biggest proponents of NAFTA, this free trade bill that gutted Midwest jobs and shipped them overseas so that U.S. multinational corporations could go exploit their cheap labor in trade for, I guess this was the narrative, that we're going to get lower prices here. Now, we've seen recently, especially with inflation, how much of a lie that actually is, not to mention the disastrous consequences for people whose jobs were shipped overseas. But again, this is who Joe Biden is and was throughout his entire career in the Senate. One more here. We got Joe Biden, 5 years before the invasion, said that the only way of disarming Iraq is taking Saddam down. So one of the most aggressive and fearsome supporters of the illegal invasion of Iraq, which obviously had disastrous consequences as well. So again, this is Joe Biden. This is who Joe Biden has always been. This is who Joe Biden was under the Obama administration. This is who Joe Biden was when he was running in 2020. So again, the idea that anybody would have thought that he was going to be the FDR figure to tackle this moment that we are in right now, to push back against fascism, the idea that he was going to be the vanguard or the bulwark against a fascist takeover and protecting democratic values, is fucking ridiculous. But nonetheless, that's what advocates like Debra Messing previously believed. But I guess that even she is now having somewhat of a wake up, along with all these other Democrats as well. So more details here. They say more than a week after the abortion decision, top Biden aides are still wrangling over releasing new actions in response, despite the draft decision leaking 6 weeks earlier. And White House counsel Dana Remus had assured senior aides the Supreme Court wouldn't rule on abortion that day, and a White House press aide assigned to the issue was walking to get coffee when the alert hit. And several Democratic leaders privately mocked how the president stood in the foyer of the White House, squinting through his remarks from a teleprompter as demonstrators demonstrators poured into the streets, making only vague promises of actions because he and other aides hadn't decided on more. They had over a month to prepare for the Roe decision to come down. Not even a month, let's be real about it. They've had decades to prepare for this overturning of Roe v. Wade. This has been a project since the Roe v. Wade decision that conservatives have been launching, an all-out offensive. You could have codified it under the Obama administration, but the idea that like they were surprised by this, they were taken off guard by this decision coming out, even after it was already leaked over a month earlier, it's just completely fucking ridiculous. Again, they don't even have the basics of like managing their administration at this point, but they continue here saying, then Biden's July 1st meeting with governors to talk about their efforts to protect abortion rights was planned so last minute that none of those who attended came in person, and several of those invited declined to rearrange their schedules to appear virtually. Getting declined by other governors in terms of protecting abortion rights, just fucking laughable. But they continue saying multiple Democratic politicians who have reached out to work with Biden, whether it's on specific bills, brainstorming, or outreach, often don't hear anything back at all, and potential appointees have languished for months, waiting to hear if they'll get jobs or when they'll be done with vetting. We're talking about just the basics of administrating a presidential office here. And invitations to events are scarce, thanks to thank you calls barely happen, and even some aides within the White House wonder why Biden didn't fire anyone from the West Wing or the FDA to demonstrate some accountability or at least anger over the baby formula debacle. And they continue saying Democrats worry the lack of decisions and authority are deepening their own midterm problems. No shit, and feeding a sense that the president couldn't truly handle the extra complications of a run for re-election in 2024. Not that the American people even want him to run for re-election, but they say, and along the way, reinforcing narratives that he's an old man not fit for the moment. Yeah, no shit he is. He's senile. All you have to do is go and compare, how he speaks now, how he engages with the public right now versus him even under the Obama administration. Go watch the Joe Biden versus Paul Ryan debates. He's a completely different person. He's definitely fallen off of an edge here, but the idea that he's going to be able to competently run in 2024, let alone beat Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, let alone then have an effective administration, assuming that he won that election, none of that is going to happen. So again, if Democrats want any chance in 2024, they will not stick by Joe Biden. But we got another quote here saying, there's no fight, another Democratic member told CNN. People understand that a lot of this is out of his hands, but what you want to see is a president out there swinging. So again, even if you do have somewhat of blockades, whether it's Manchin or Sinema, I think obviously he could be doing much, much more to confront them publicly, to force them to fall in line with his agenda. But even if you want to accept the relative limitations of his power, he's still not using executive orders on student debt. He's still not using executive orders on marijuana legalization and a whole host of other things that he could be doing from his executive position. So, it's not just about blockades that are in his way. It's also about his lack of urgency, his lack of care, or his lack of belief in any of the, policies that the American people overwhelmingly want him to follow through on. But now we get to a little bit of pushback here, or I guess people who are saying that these types of things that are coming out from these politicians and activists are just scapegoating the president. So this is pretty hilarious here. They say, fundamentally, Biden and his aides are operating from a very different sense of the presidency. He's being realistic, they believe, and responsible, not just because his options are truly limited, but specifically because he's trying to restore the structural integrity of the government and of democracy after 4 years of Trump. Restore the structural integrity of the government and of democracy. What the fuck is he doing to protect democracy? We haven't seen any major voting rights legislation passed. We've seen Republican state legislatures all around the country who are ridiculously gerrymandering their elections. We have this new Supreme Court ruling that's going to be coming down, I think, in October, on the independent state legislature theory, which I covered in a different video if you want to go watch a breakdown on that, which would basically allow these state legislatures to ditch democracy in its entirety. It would allow them to appoint their own slate of electors, ignoring the popular will of their states for presidential elections. It would allow them even more leeway in racial gerrymandering of their districts, setting restrictions on voting rights within their states, so many different things, attacks on democracy that you could point to, and the Biden administration isn't doing anything to push back against that. So I guess their idea of, restoring the structural integrity of the government and democracy after 4 years of Trump is just to come out and give flowery speeches or tweet about how we need to protect democracy by voting again for Democrats. I mean, that's literally all they got. They have nothing of actual substance to push back against the fascist takeover of the United States. But nonetheless, I guess that's what they believe they're doing in their minds. But they continue saying they also see him as taking a more integrated view, moving on canceling student loan debt, for example, they believe could imperil whatever is left of the legislative agenda that's starting to emerge from Senate negotiations. What the fuck does this even mean? If you cancel student debt, that nobody in the Senate is going to be willing to work with you? Well, number one, Republicans are already not willing to work with you on any substantial good pieces of legislation. Number two, what are you scared of? Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, they're already completely eviscerating your entire agenda. Build Back Better, your main flagship social spending bill, was eviscerated by these two people within your own party. I mean, the idea that it could imperil whatever's left of the legislative agenda, there's already nothing fucking left from the legislative agenda, and canceling student debt is overwhelmingly popular, and oh, by the way, you kind of fucking owe it to people because you helped create the crisis of student debt in this country in the first place. So, top to bottom, just absolute failures. But we finish off here with a quote saying, the country didn't elect Joe Biden because they wanted a Democratic Donald Trump to go out there every day and divide the country more. Divide the country more by doing what? Passing overwhelmingly popular policies? Is that your idea of dividing the country? Seems like that would be pretty unifying. But of course, this quote comes from Cedric Richmond, who is currently in the White House and previously came from one of the most polluted districts in the entire country in Louisiana, where he literally had a district that was called Cancer Alley because of the chemical pollution that he allowed to take place, rejecting calls from his constituents, taking money from the fossil fuel industry. So that's who Cedric Richmond is. No surprise that he would be pushing forward this type of a narrative. But they say Democrats attacking Biden are scapegoating the president or distracted and not focusing on what they should be focused on. He saved democracy once by beating a tyrant. He's doing it again, but he doesn't do it by beating his chest. Yeah, okay, but nobody's saying go out there and beat your chest. They're saying go out there and pass overwhelmingly popular pieces of legislation that would improve your standing in the eyes of the American people, improve your chances of winning in the midterms and the 2024 elections, and actually be a substantial Democratic pushback against the Republican takeover of the country. Okay, this idea that you have to just sit around and do nothing, that you don't want to, piss off the fringes of the Republican right that is opposed to things like lowering prescription drug costs or raising the minimum wage, canceling student debt, etc. The idea that that is a better path forward to defeating Republicans or preventing them from hijacking democracy is absolutely delusional. I mean, again, he's saying he saved democracy by beating a tyrant. Save democracy? You didn't save democracy. You temporarily forestalled the inevitable conclusion of what is on the horizon right now. Again, talking about the independent state legislature theory, all of these Republicans who are openly coming out with bills across the country that are explicitly anti-democratic. I mean, there's nothing about this country that is democratic right now. We have the filibuster rule that Joe Biden is still in favor of maintaining. That is undemocratic. We have a Senate where states like Wyoming have the same amount of representation as states like California that have hundreds of times more than their population size. I mean, you want to go top to bottom within the legislative districts within a lot of these conservative states, top to bottom, there is nothing democratic about our system. So you have to unwind the structural problems with that system if you actually wanted to protect or enhance democracy in this country. But what is he doing? He beat Donald Trump. That means, okay, hands clean. We just got to step off the pedal. We saved democracy. I mean, what is your actual plan for substantially expanding a multiracial democracy? They have none. They have absolutely no plan to viably get through voting rights through the Senate or through the House at this point. So, just laughable takes here coming from the Biden administration. But I mean, you can see it there. When you lose Debra Messing, okay, you have completely lost the plot because she was one of the biggest and most, confident Democratic cheerleaders for years now. And so if even she is coming out and saying that she's pissed off and fed up and doesn't think that there's a point to voting, maybe you should do a little bit of reflection and understand that the overwhelming majority of the country thinks that you're a pathetic little bitch who isn't even willing to go out and fight for the agenda that you promised the American people. I mean, come on, this isn't that complicated. But unfortunately, I do have to finish off the video here with a take from Ro Khanna, who is, a nominally left-wing, somewhat left-wing politician in the House of Representatives. And I think that this take from him was laughable. I mean, imagine coming out as these types of articles are coming out on how even normie Democrats are fed up with Joe Biden and then running defense for this guy. So here from Ro Khanna, he said, POTUS didn't get there by accident. He's the president of the United States. He's the leader of our party. He defeated Donald Trump. He's owed a degree of respect, and I say that as someone to his left. There's a tone in which to challenge the administration and offer new ideas, and that tone ought to be one of good faith to help the president, not throwing darts to weaken him when he's the leader of our party. Fuck off. I mean, completely fuck off. This is a guy who couldn't give two single solitary shits about any of the major policies that Ro Khanna believes in. Okay, this is somebody who is actively fighting against. He said he would repeal Medicare for all. He said he would reject Medicare for all if it came to his desk as the president after being passed through the House and the Senate. This guy is fundamentally corrupt and opposed to the entire leftist project within this country. Okay, so the idea that you would have nominally left-wing politicians like Ro Khanna coming out and running defense for this guy, even as normie Democrats are jumping ship, this is just fucking pathetic. But I guess that's all I got to say about Ro Khanna. But listen, I mean, in the broader picture of things, none of this is surprising. 71% of the American people don't want Biden to run again, and it's because he ran on all of these different various extremely popular policies and reforms that the American people desperately need. And when you fail to pass those policies, when you fail, to even show the American people the appearance of fighting for the agenda that you are trying to get passed, then, of course people are going to jump ship. Of course young people are going to be fed up because they see a do-nothing, old, senile, corrupt president who isn't following through on any of his major campaign promises. So there shouldn't be any surprises there. If you actually want to turn around the prospects on the 2022 midterms or the 2024 election, you need to jump ship from Joe Biden. This is not going to be a guy who is going to be able to defeat Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump in the 2024 election. And honestly, at this point right now, he's an active harm to the rest of the party. He is not a leader. He is basically just resigned to sitting on the sidelines, being a cheerleader, and just magically hoping that things improve in this country.